Welcome back, guys, to the channel. In today's episode, I want to talk about something so crucial and so important that applies for both cinematography and color grading, and that is exposure. Exposure is usually the first thing that the cinematographer thinks about on set. Why? Because it tells us so much about the story and the mood and the tone. It tells us about the characters, and that is why so much thought is put into that. And the same should be done here in post-production in color grading. Now, one thing to consider here and to be aware of is that there is not a certain level of exposure. There is not a right or wrong answer in exposure. Why? Because that is dictated by the script. If a scene should be dark because it makes sense in the story, okay, so it's a bit underexposed, that's okay. And the opposite is true for scenes that are a bit overexposed, maybe for comedic effect or any other effect that the director and the DP thought of. What's important here to consider is that none of the footage should be clipped. Okay, whether that is in the highs or lows, it's very, very important that they are within our container. Why is that important? Because usually the expectation is that the colorist can magically fix those things when the reality is totally different. In fact, if the camera didn't see that, we as colorists not going to be able to see it as well. So that is the consideration. So if you want to have the right exposure, that thought should be put on set the day off when you're shooting that footage. Okay, with that said, now let's look at our exposure. You can see that we have just a very, very simple node tree here, our exposure, contrast, and this could be our balance over here. And now the first thing that comes up to mind to most of you probably watching this video is that we have our offset here. This is akin to working with our exposure in the sense that it does, okay, we can adjust our exposure, and this is very easy. This is underneath, you can see that we have our master wheel, and we can just go left if we want to darken our image, or we can go right if we want to brighten our image. And this tool has been with us forever, even before DaVinci Resolve, and actually Live, Gamma, Gain, and Offset, they've been there forever. Okay, and I love the offset. I know how it feels. It's really awesome, and I can manipulate or I can adjust the exposure of my image just very easily down here. Now, something to talk about is that there is another tool that we can use. We're going to go here on our clips, and we're going to go to the second one over here. I'm going to close this, and now we can see that maybe this could be a little bit underexposed. Once again, really depends on the creative input of the DP and the director, but say that we want this brighter. Now, I can go again with my offset. However, I want to go now on my HDR palette. Now, this, guys, was introduced with Resolve 17, so it's been a few years, and since then, the global tool here in the HDR palette has become my favorite way of adjusting exposure. Why is that? Well, it's very simple. First of all, because the HDR palette here, it's color space aware. So now it knows what color space I'm working with, and I can work with confidence without overthinking. So that is really awesome. And secondly, it's because this is photometrically accurate. So it's closer to how we would see things in real life, works in linear fashion. So for example, if I want to go up by a stop, I want to brighten my image by about a stop, and that's the language we speak on set, I can just type 1 here, and you can see that we brighten here our picture by about a stop. Okay, then I can also do the opposite, by the way. I can make it really dark, so -1. So it's like closing the iris, all right, by about a stop over here. So in this case, you can see that I'm going to go back to 1, and that is awesome. And that's why I prefer to use this global tool in the HDR palette. Now, does this mean, though, that this tool is better than the offset? Absolutely not. I think that should be dependent on your own feel for each tool. Okay, so it's up to you what feels right to you and what you're used to. I'm basically just showing you two different tools. Okay, now I use this, as I said, because I know that maybe if I underexpose by about a stop, quarter stop, I can just, adjust it over here. But then if you don't feel like that is not necessary for you and it's easier for you to use your offset, please do so. Now, another thing I wanted to talk about is that sometimes can be a little bit kind of time consuming going to your HDR palette, going back to your primaries to adjust your offset here when doing balancing, okay, when balancing your footage. There is another way that you could basically get the same operation just as your HDR global tool over here, just by a few clicks here in your exposure node. So in this case, I am going to reset this, okay? I'm going to say reset node grade, just like that. You can see it's reset. And now instead of having to go back to my HDR and then primaries for balance, I'm just going to stay here on my primaries this time around. And here on my exposure, I'm going to right click and now change the gamma over here to now linear. Okay. So this is going to work in linear fashion now. Now, all I have to do is just adjust my gain. So this is now a linear gain operation, which is essentially the same exact thing as our global in the HDR palette. So now I can go up by about stop, or I can go up or down and make the adjustment. Now, is this better than using the HDR palette? Not really. This is only if you're trying to save some time and stay in one palette, not having to change between one and the other. Do I use this? Well, not really. I still use my HDR palette over here because I have a panel. So for me, it's very easy to make that change. However, if you guys don't, and this is easier for you, you can, as I said, just change the gamma to linear and then just adjust that gain to make those adjustments. Okay, so that is a quick one for today, guys. Exposure is really crucial. It's the most important thing that you should be thinking about when starting to grade. Why? Because oftentimes we go so much into our contrast or our saturation and start balancing things without really thinking that all it needs is a push in exposure, you know. So that is something to think about. So please let me know if this helped you guys, and I'll see you on the next episode, in which we're going to talk about a different topic, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.